Now, when he's grieved in his heart, I want you to think about the way you as a parent feel when your children are doing things that you know are only going to end up hurting them. And others possibly, but hurting them. And how it grieves you to see them just set on doing stupid, foolish things with all kinds of effort to do it that's only going to bring them pain. Okay, so he wasn't just thinking, man, I'm just so sorry I made those people. No, it was grieving him in his heart. They said, I made you guys, I gave you all this stuff, and look what you're doing with what I gave you. Look, I know there's a lot of people that like to buy into the idea of pre-trib, post-trib, whatever trib, rapturing things, whatever. Forget all that nonsense, but think about the mindset of wanting to escape what's coming. You know, the thing that's not talked about by Tim LaHaye and all those guys in Left Behind, and what's not talked about by all these other rapture people, is that even if there was one, the protection goes to what? I have seen that you are righteous before me. Does any of those books deal with that? Do any of those rapture people talk about that? He doesn't cease yielding fruit. See, that's part of the problem that we have. You know, things don't go well and we start to cease yielding fruit because we panic, we're anxious. Wonder why that happens? Because we're thinking wrong. And those thoughts, when they come, get the panicky emotions attached to it. And the fear and all that strong, negative, unproductive emotion gets attached to that thought. The thought was, there's drought. There's a perception of coming lack, a lack of stuff, a lack of something. And so anxiousness, fear, panic, all these things, doubt, start to creep in. And what happens when you have that emotion connected to that thought? It's going to affect what? Your actions. And what are the actions connected to? The yielding of fruit. When he says, I tried the kidneys, you know, like when we talk about having a gut feeling about something, or you feel something in your gut, so to speak, that's what he's talking about. He says, I know what you're feeling and what you're kind of leaning towards. You know, I love when people say to me, well, you know, I got to check in my spirit. And you know what? That's probably true. They got to check in the spirit in man. It wasn't necessarily the ruach that the check came from. So don't try to cash that check. Oh, I love it when I talk to people about keeping Torah and said, well, you know, I just kind of had a check in my spirit about that. About what? Moving from Sunday to Saturday? About stopping eating pork? What spirit is that check coming from? Because that check is not cashable. It's going to bounce. It's going to get you in trouble. It's a bad check. You are going to receive according to what you do. Oh, that's Old Testament stuff, Rabbi. That can't be true because that sounds like salvation by works, blah, blah, blah. Really? I don't know. Can we think that maybe Paul might? Oh, Paul's going to say something different. Well, let's go to Romans chapter 2 and see if Paul says anything different. It's a thinking process. There's a thinking process that leads to actions, and those actions are going to get you a reward of some sort. You are going to be rendered according to your works, some sort of a result. There's a consequence to your choices, to your actions. Either everlasting life or wrath and displeasure. When you start doing what's right in your own eyes, okay, we're connecting those two teachings together again. When your thinking process and your gut is trying to lead you to what you want versus what he wants, that will lead eventually to actions and habits that lead to a destiny called death. That's why we're doing so many parts of this teaching. This is everything. If you can't get your thinking and your heart right, none of the other pieces are going to matter because they're all going to fall in line with that thinking and heart, which leads to the actions and the habits and the destinies. So the way that seems right to man leads to what? Death. The key word there is seems. Oh, yeah, you're fasting. Hey, I'm glad you're fasting to try to get close to me. But what about the other half of this? Remember the two great commands Yeshua talks about? To love the Creator with all your being, etc., and to love each other? They were focusing, he said here, on him. Oh, you're all focused on me, but you missed the part that I want you to focus on each other the same way. So they're in their mind saying, oh, it seems right to them to treat people a certain way while at the same time treating him a certain way. And he's like, wait, I've told you how to treat both. That's Torah. In the Torah, I've taught you how to treat me as creator and how to treat the other people as co-human beings. Now, the word yoke has to do with two things, basically. When we picture it in a literal sense, it's how you bind animals together to plow. You put a yoke on them. And if they're unequally yoked, they're not going to pull a straight line. They're going to kind of turn and end up in a circle. But yoking also, from the point of view of Scripture, talks about the idea of teaching. Wrong thoughts and wrong hearts come from wrong teaching. I love when people say, oh, well, you know, all that stuff, all that Torah stuff is so burdensome. Really? And you keep Christmas? What's more burdensome there is as an observance than Christmas? You got to change your whole house over. You got to hang up all this stuff. You got to buy people all kinds of presents you don't even like. Tell me you didn't have to do that. Well, but I know they're going to get me something, so I have to get them something. That's a burden. You burdened yourself. And by the way, some of you were still paying that off. Some of you are still paying off Christmases from years ago that you don't even keep it anymore. And you're still paying it off. That's not a burden? Because we're so hyper-stimulated. We're so overstimulated that when we don't know how to sit still and do nothing. You know, Yeshua used to go off on his own, sometimes all day, where nobody else was, just to be quiet and be with Abba. That would drive you insane if you tried to do that. So why don't we try it 5 minutes at a time, and eventually an hour at a time? Shouldn't it bother us? Well, let me just point something out. Maybe this would bother you, but I want you to look in the mirror. Would it bother you to realize that the people in Isaiah's time are having the same struggles as the people in Proverbs 6, as the same people, then we see the same thing happening it's never changing. Why is it never changing? Because we're doing what seems right to a man. We're not getting right yoking. We're not yoking ourselves to right instruction, because we'll go ahead and yoke to someone who knows just as little as us, maybe less than us. What do you know? Just because they're in 5 minutes longer than you doesn't mean they even know more than you do.